Hey, I want to give a clarifying word because I've gotten a couple questions. By the way, the video I shared today about the teaching that's going around that says, we're not sinning because we're not under law, and since it's not defined as sin anymore, therefore it's not sin, which is just stupid. It is self-justification. But that video is 3 years old. So I've shared it because the teaching is resurfacing. And I address it well enough in that video that I don't need to do another one. I'm just repurposing a lot of my older content. Anyway, the question I get is things like smoking or drinking. How do I stop? Okay, I told somebody in an email, look, it's not what enters the body that defiles it. It's what proceeds from the heart. It's the adulteries and the blasphemies and the attitudes and the hatred and the lust and the covetousness that proceed from the heart that is the sin, not just what put in your body. And for some people, they're not going to get free from smoking by calling it sin because they're reinforcing their own condemnation. And they need to see, still the answer is, sin is not imputed to me. I can come forward boldly to the throne of grace. And the point is not to overcome sin, but to come forward to the Lord. And yet, in coming forward to the Lord and being washed by Him, you'll start to see things change. But it may not be your smoking habit. So this is a little complicated. The reason people smoke and the reason they drink and do drugs is a kind of self-medication, usually, because it's not the sin in itself, really. They are self-medicating themselves because of all kinds of sins. So in their relationships, because of their sin nature, they've got all kinds of damage and stress. In their life, they've got all kinds of damage and stress, and they can't deal. And they're under condemnation. So they revert to drugs or something to medicate it. Okay, now that in itself is not really sin. It's just, it still falls under the works of the flesh and is a form of relying on something other than Christ. But we live in a toxic stew, and He knows we're weak. He is a sympathetic high priest. And I do not believe He is imputing those things to us as sin. From when we accept the judgment on our flesh and say, okay, it's ruined, we're accepting the diagnosis and the physician and his cure. And that's the point, is to come forward to Him. Now it is, when it comes to the real heart sins, this is also what people want to judge about themselves is smoking and drinking and drugs or whatever it is they're doing, nudie magazines or whatever it is they're doing. But these people never ask me about the deeper issues, which is what actually God's looking at. How they view others, how they view truth, how they comport themselves in their heart. And this is where the trouble really lies, that He sees that we don't want to admit to. It's easy to judge yourself and say, yeah, I'm a sinner because I smoke. But what about your pride and the fact that you always have to be right? And you're willing to even twist the truth in order to be right. And slander and lie. I'm not talking about anything specific. I'm just saying, what about how you treat the people around you? How you won't take responsibility for your actions in relationships? How you make everybody else pick up the slack for you because you're just refuse to exercise any responsibility. That's the deeper stuff. Your smoking is easy. Anybody can point to that and say, oh, that's And then you can say, oh, I got free from smoking. The Lord delivered me from my sin, and now you're in pride. So the point I'm saying is that the real sins are deeper. But, and those are the ones we really need to learn to judge through self-knowledge. When I'm doing this, I'm just being vain. When I'm doing this, I'm not arguing because I love the truth. I'm arguing because I love myself, and I have an identity associated with being a wall troll. That's the stuff that where it touches your identity and who you are and who you think you are and how you validate yourself and how you are entitled and demand to be treated by others because of what you do, and expect people to wait hand and foot on you, and that's the stuff that people won't judge, that tears up their relationships and causes them to live in a situation that they just want to escape from, and so then they go to other things. And those are the things we need the real help with. And what I'll tell you is, if you really judge your flesh and are honest about it and accept the diagnosis, and not just be general, but really judge it for what it is in the sight of the Lord, with some self-knowledge and wisdom from the Holy Spirit. This is what Paul did when he realized that his pursuit of, the Christians in the name of defending the traditions that God had passed down to his nation, he learned it was just covetousness, and he judged it as such. That's self-knowledge and wisdom from the Holy Spirit, conviction, And if you do that, where you're letting the Lord touch things that are deeper than just smoking, a lot of these surface things like smoking or drinking or whatever might just fall off. In fact, many times they do. Now, what I'm not advocating is navel-gazing and staring at yourself and trying to judge yourself and try to search me, Lord, if there any evil way in me. No. But as you come to the Lord, especially if you're someone who preaches the gospel to himself, and unless the word of Christ dwell in you richly, you will find yourself at odds with some of the things you do in certain relationships and conversations. And you'll have to judge it. And you'll say, that's not a character. And that's another thing. We're not leaning on the law to tell us these things. The new creation, the new man, was created in righteousness and holiness into the image of him who created him. We have a new nature and are partakers of the divine nature in our spirit. And when we walk according to the Spirit, by really being saturated with the knowledge of Christ and growing in the knowledge of Christ, we start to see things that are just not compatible, especially in how we treat people. And that's really where it comes down to the rubber meeting the road. He's called us into the fellowship. Corinthians says we're called into the fellowship of the Son. And yet many of us are not fit for fellowship because we damage everybody. Because we don't know how to fellowship. Because we're not transparent. And we have all kinds of ambition and avarice and self-justification and covetousness and all kinds of things. And that's why we're alone. That's why we don't have a church life springing up around us. And that's okay. I believe we're at the end. I believe that we are Philadelphia. We have a little strength, the least amount of strength, but we've kept his word, not denied his name. And regardless of our situation, we are still fellow citizens with the saints, members of the household of God. But we are messed up. In this generation, we are really messed up. It's like all the iniquities have reached their full, and we're just awful. I'm not going to... in that way, I may sound like some of these people that say, look, we're just awful. It's true. And we do need to accept that and reconcile ourselves to it in order to walk before the Lord. But the point is to walk before the Lord. And yet, as we do, He is the physician. And He heals these things into us. I used to have a life that was just characterized by anger and bitterness. I couldn't let go of things easily. I remembered everything everybody had ever said to me and held it against all of them. The Lord just beat that out of me. I don't have the strength to be that kind of bitter anymore. I really don't. I forget things. And I know that's the Lord working in me. It's not something I've done. And it makes more room for Him. And I'm not saying, oh, I'm full, and I'm Mr. Spiritual. I'm just saying that walking with the Lord changes things. And it also causes the things that we run to medicate ourselves to fall off. I'm just not so attracted to those things. I barely even think about them, So, don't get hung up if you're a smoker or if you're a drinker or, now if you're drunk and it creates issues with your behavior that damages the fellowship, then you may not have fellowship with other people. You may be separated. It doesn't mean you're separated from God. And that's the other thing, is when the church separates itself from someone, it doesn't mean that you're separated from God. It just means there's stuff about you that you're already out of the fellowship with people. You're already not fellowshipping. They're just acknowledging that that's the case. When someone's there only for their flesh in the group of people that are seeking to be there for Christ, they're not in the fellowship. They're not aligned in purpose. How can two walk together unless they're agreed? So there are times we separate from people, but that's for the Lord to deal with them. But the problem isn't, let's say it's their drunkenness or their adultery. That's not the only issue. Those are the surface things. There's deeper stuff. That brother in Corinth, there was deeper stuff than just his fornication. I mean, it was so bad, though, that they had to separate from him. But what drives you to have an affair with your father's wife? What kind of bitterness, anger, rage, self-justification, pride, entitlement, whatever it is, caused that situation to come about? That guy had evil upon evil upon evil undealt with in his heart that manifested itself as the outward thing. So when he was brought to a place of godly sorrow, I believe it was a deep, deep self-realization and a judgment of his flesh to realize how far he was away from fellowship with Christ and the liberty that we have in Him. And that is what is really needed. A deep realization of our need for the Lord and a deep appreciation and an agreement with what those things are in our hearts that cause us. I mean, many of the people I deal with in comments or in emails are just ruined people. They're living in absolute wreckage caused by deep sins, sinful attitudes and stuff, where they've just never let anyone touch them. And they want to ask about superficial sins. They always want to ask about superficial outward stuff. If I lust after a person, or I can't stop smoking, I can't stop masturbating, whatever it is. There's people that go to Eliezer, for example, and they ask the same question 25 times in a 2-hour period. I don't even know how they do it. And it's a lengthy description of some outward sin that they're supposedly just so grieved about. And yet they don't see that every time they're using a VPN because I have a limit of 5 queries for a free user. You can ask 5 questions a day because each one costs me money. I mean, it's ridiculous. So what they do is they use a VPN to circumvent the system so that it keeps, every time they ask the question, it uses a different IP address, so they get no limits effectively. So they're stealing from me. And I mean, Eliezer costs me hundreds of dollars a month to run. And it makes me so mad because they're not logged in and I have no way to reach these people and tell them to stop. And I can't stop them from doing it because they're using a VPN. And they don't have any problem doing this. Nothing in their conscience is bothering them. That they're stealing. They're asking these questions about such superficial surface issues that they are calling their sin, and they won't judge themselves. Okay, I realize I kind of got on a rant there, so let me just wrap this up. I just want to encourage you, don't just get stuck on the surface level stuff. The real things that God is dealing with is the deeper things in our hearts, our attitudes, our motives, how we relate to others. This is what he's interested in, and there's nothing you can really do about that but see it for what it is. And there is a place for seeing ourselves clearly in his light. And then as we do, he changes it. He really does make these deep changes in our being. He's much more interested in the bitterness getting washed away, and the offense and the hatred, and the lying and the entitlement, all those kinds of things, than he is about whether you're smoking. That stuff, once you get the inward stuff healed, a lot of the things we do to medicate ourselves just fall off. And what I'm not advocating here is a quest to perfect yourself or change yourself. What I'm talking about, though, is sin is deeper than the superficial things people are looking at. And the reason I brought up the AI thing is just because it's so ironic. They're swallowed up with some superficial sin while they're robbing me blind with Eliezer using a VPN to circumvent the limits. They don't see it. So, anyway, I also want to say, I'm probably going to have to do a separate video, but it costs an enormous amount to do this channel. And I don't want to say that I'm different than other channels. Everybody pays a price from the persecution and from the attacks and the lies and the slander. It is not fun. But this channel's unique because I'm here making resources available, writing books. I have online resources that are totally unique, that, like the Eliezer system, the AI question answer system, that's one of a kind, AI meditation room, online devotionals, mailing lists that automatically send out devotionals, plus all my books, plus an AI video recommender, plus an online foundations course, just a whole lot of stuff. And just hosting it every month and developing it costs me a lot of money. And I try to offer it as freely as possible, but the way I survive, and this stuff takes me an enormous amount of time as well. Last week I accidentally screwed up my devotional database so that it flagged everybody as having read the wrong day. And I had to go through and calculate and guesstimate what day everybody was on and reset the database. It took me hours. And it seems like every week I'm monitoring these systems. I monitor all the queries that come into Eliezer to make sure it's working right and answering things correctly. Just tons of time every day. Plus, I'm working on the Ephesians commentary that, I can't, I'm sort of in over my head where I can't, sometimes I just want to walk away from it all. That's how I felt this year, so I'll just quit. But I can't, because I've got all these systems that would just fall apart if I didn't spend time. Plus, they cost money every month. And I do have some supporters that give me some amounts regularly that helps offset these bills. It seems like every month there's a miracle. But I noticed with all the attacks, my book sales slowed to a crawl, and last month especially, and those are how I pay for everything, plus live. So this channel is unique as far as how much resources I'm spending of my own money to keep things going. And I do it because I just believe I'm called to do it. There's no other reason. I can't explain it. I just have to keep going. But if you feel led, please consider supporting the release of books. It really helps. And believe me, I'm not rolling in cash. But every once in a while, I have to make a reminder. Maybe once every couple months, I try to do a reminder video that there's resources that cost money, and I do need the support. And I appreciate it. Thanks.